with revs didn't begin with the S2000, the Integra Type R, or even VTEC. It began in the 60s. This is a Honda S800. It weighs just 771 kilos, revs to 8,500 RPM, or even 11,000 if you really wanted to push it. And it's so small it looks like you could accidentally forget about it in your pocket. Honda had always made motorcycles and only started making cars in 1963. So this isn't just another small sports car. It's 791 cc's of Formula One inspired fury. And more importantly, this is Honda's first attempt at beating the British at their own game. Let's find out more. The S800 launched in 1965 as a development of the S600, and you could have it either as a pretty convertible or, like this one, as a neat little coupe. It was aimed squarely at the lower end of the market, targeting cars like the Triumph Spitfire and the Austin Healey Sprite. Cheap, cheerful British roadsters that had been dominating the market for years. And then along comes Honda, a company that, let's not forget, had been building cars for about 5 minutes. Their audacity was magnificent, and it paid off. When Road and Track tested the earlier S600 in 1965, they said, "The steering and handling of the Honda are excellent, and frankly, more reminiscent of the much more expensive Lotus Elan than the cars in its own price class." Now that's not faint praise, that was a warning shot, and one that it seems the British didn't take enough notice of. It might have technically sat outside Japan's K-car rules, but in real life it is gobsmackingly small, and it only weighs 771 kilos. That's less than a modern Super Mini's door. It looks condensed, like someone has scaled down a sports car to 75% on a photocopier. And that minimal mass creates a virtuous circle. You don't need huge power, you just need revs. And this is where things get really interesting, because this little jewel has just 791 cc's. That's roughly half the size of what a modern hot hatch would have. And in 1965, it already had twin overhead cams and quad carbs. That's one for each tiny 198cc cylinder. Just look at how beautiful this thing is. Honda entered Formula One at around this time, and I'm sure that some of that rubbed off on this little power unit, which to me resembles a Swiss watch. In any case, it was enough for 70 horsepower at 8,500 RPM. Now, just for context, a modern Ford Fiesta, which came 35 years later with a much bigger 1.2 litre engine, was still 10 horsepower down on the Honda. Decades before VTEC, Honda didn't chase torque, they chased revs. And because this thing weighs next to nothing, 70 horsepower was enough to make it the first production Honda to go over 100 miles an hour. And it was also the fastest 1 litre production car in the world. Now that is essentially motorbike energy in a car body, which makes sense because Honda was still thinking like a motorcycle company. The early versions of the S800 even still had chain drive to the rear wheels. This 800M, which is essentially a Mark II and came out in 1968, uses a more conventional prop shaft. Like the S600, the first cars also had fully independent rear suspension, but this generation moved on to a solid rear axle. Less exotic maybe, but more robust and more export friendly. The 800M also brought some other changes, the big indicators that you see tacked onto the sides, which originally obviously weren't meant to be there. Dual circuit brakes, lean burn carburation, flush interior door handles, safety glass, all changes aimed at being able to sell this on the American market. But in a twist, it was never actually exported there. More about that in a moment. Production ended in 1970 with just over 11,000 of these built. And then Honda didn't make another S Roadster for another 30 years. This isn't just another 1960s oddity. This is the moment that Honda decided it was no longer going to just copy Britain. It was going to outthink it. Let's see how it works on the road today. Right, I can't wait to start up this little car. So, are you ready for this? Oh, it sounds so good. Now this one has a stainless steel exhaust, so it's a little bit louder than standard, but the actual timbre, the sound itself is the same as on the other cars. There's just a bit more of it, and honestly, the throttle pedal is really, really light, and the engine responds instantly. There's just no inertia to it. Obviously, being such a tiny engine, I guess that's why. The gear change, it sits here exactly where you want it. It's a tiny little stubby gear stick like that, and it goes in with the most snickety, fantastic feel. I hope all the other gears will feel the same. We'll find out shortly, but let's go. The clutch is really light, and also it's very, very short of travel, but quite easy to modulate and pretty easy to use. The little gearbox, wow, it's so lovely. It reminds me a bit, to be fair, of the gearbox I had on my Austin Healey Sprite, which feels very similar to this in weight, in precision. It's a wonderful thing though, for sure. Now, it has synchro on all the top 3 gears, but not on first. So when we come to junctions like this, need to come to a complete stop to pop that in, but that really isn't too much of a chore. I only went up to 6,000 RPM there. I can't wait to take it through the gears. By the way, this is redlined at 8,500 revs, but these engines will actually go on to 11,000. Now, there's no point of doing it in this state of tune, because really, you're not going to get any more speed or power out of it. So I'm not going to take it past 8.5, but it can go up to 11. Now, that's just mental for a car of this era. Now these things really, I know I use dual like a lot, but it really is. When you look around it, it's so dainty. I think it's such a pretty car. Those side markers, the bigger ones, detract a little bit, but it still looks so nice. And the details, like the badges, the little hump on the bonnet, everything about it, it feels so well engineered. Even at the back, if you lift the tailgate, then the 2 little struts, they just lock in place by twisting. That's just good thinking. I'm sure it exists in other cars, but I've never seen it before. Definitely quite short geared at 4th gear now, 40 miles an hour, and it's already doing 3,000 revs. But you have to have that because this thing thrives on revs. The steering, it feels quite odd, a little bit vague off center, but I'll talk to you about that a little bit more. I don't think that's these cars in general. I think it's this particular car that just needs a little bit of fettling. But we're now coming up to taking it through the gears, and I just can't wait. Let's see what it's capable of. Doesn't sound quite like anything I've ever come across before. Obviously, the comparison to a motorbike is inevitable, but for me, it goes beyond that. It feels like a chainsaw. The engine, I'm sure it's not solid mounted, but it almost feels like it is solid mounted in there, because you get a little hint of vibration coming through, and I don't know, the noise it makes is just so addictive. There is definitely a hint of motorbike in there, but it's not enough to say it feels like a motorbike. It's just quite unlike anything else that I've ever come across in a car. And it picks up from about 6,000 RPM. Before that, it really doesn't do very much. Now, I was talking about the steering before. there's quite a little bit of weird slop off centre, but Mark, who owns this one, just taken it to get the geometry looked at, and seems like they didn't quite apply the right bit to it, because when you're on the straight ahead it wanders around, it just doesn't feel quite right, but as soon as you get into a corner it feels completely at home. I think they put in zero toe in, whereas it needs maybe 1 degree of toe or something to stabilize it a bit. You've got this quite big wheel considering the size of the rest of the car, and once you get going it's just ever so light. There's no need for power steering, even at slower speeds. It's still pretty good really. It's not heavy at all. The suspension is a little bit it's a little bit softer than I thought it would be, and with these cars, because parts simply aren't available, when Mark changed the shocks they had to go for a setup which was slightly lower. So this is riding, I think he said, a couple of centimeters lower than the standard car would be. Honestly, the steering is almost telepathic. That's the trade-off of that sort of hint of instability off centre, is that you barely need to move it to get the car to turn. Personally, one thing I probably would want is just a little bit more damping, I think, just to stabilise the vertical movement a bit. Oh my God, what a thing! What a thing! You have to wring its neck so much to get it to move, but when you do, then you know it's got a little bit of pace. It's nothing like as fast as most modern cars, but still, for its time and for the engine size, it's really not too bad. Right, let's take it through again. Wow. It's like an elastic band, it never wants to stop pulling. The steering's really nice. It's very responsive. You can adjust the line mid-corner just with steering inputs. It's happy to tuck in further if you needed to. What have you done? I love this thing. Now, it was supposed to compete with the likes of the Sprite and Triumph Spitfire and so on. Now, the engine you would expect to be light years ahead, but what is quite shocking is that the rest of the car, the chassis itself, also feels like it's quite far ahead of those cars. Now, a Sprite, or what would have been a Midget as well, they are great handling, great driving little things. But this is just, I don't know, it feels more modern. That mixture of intake and exhaust sound is just so intoxicating. So for the rest of the car, the main controls work pretty well. We've talked about the steering, oil precision of the gear change, fantastic. The pedals are quite offset to the right. That's the only thing which is a little bit bizarre, but kind of seems like you get used to it fairly quickly and doesn't impede progress. The pedals are very close to each other, particularly the brake and the throttle, which is set up, I think, for heel and towing. Seats are really comfortable, and I'm 6'1", and I thought I'd really struggle to get into this thing and fit in it, but actually it's really good. And if you put your left leg under the clutch, I can stretch my leg right out. Either way, it's not uncomfortable. It's a bit of a miracle in packaging, to be quite honest. I'm going to talk about values in a moment, which I think will shock you, but also the reason why it was never exported to the US, despite the fact that this version, the Mark II, was largely made for that market. And by the way, the carbs that are in this car are from a Mark I, because these lean carburation ones that were used in the Mark II, very, very difficult to set up and get to work properly, so most people move back to those. But anyway, the car was made for the US market, never exported there, and you'll never believe the reason why. And it's apparently because the Americans said that it produced too many unburnt hydrocarbons, i.e. it was too dirty. Now, considering that you had a plethora of 5 and 7 litre V8s in that market, it's just really, really odd that they gave that reason. But in any case, it wasn't sold, it was just sold in the UK, in Japan, I think in Europe as well. But overall, not many made. The coupes, so this one, I think they're rarer than the convertibles, and the prices reflect that to a certain degree. The S600s that came before it are even rarer. But anyway, I had a look at what was on the market, and there's a handful of cars for sale. One is in Slovakia, but that's price on application, which I absolutely detest and is no use to us. Then there's quite a nice coupe, same sort of era as this. I think it's a 69, and that's up for sale for a reasonable sounding €25,000. There's also, and this is quite shocking, there's an earlier S600. Now they are rarer, those, but still that is on the market for an incredible €80,000. Now, I do adore these things, I think they are fantastic, but €80,000 just sounds absolutely crazy to me. Now, huge thanks to Mark for coming down today, and if you want to see another car, which is a tiny little engine which screams to heaven, then check out my video on the Fiat 600, which I think actually was around more or less the same time as this. That thing just sounds incredible. Thank you all for watching, and see you soon.